This fabric that I purchased, there's a deep crease line in it from being on the bolt. So the first thing that we have to do before we start to grain is to press our fabric and get rid of this. So I'm going to press and make sure I get this crease out. If I wanted a washable garment and the fabric was washable, I would pre-wash it. In any case, you need to make sure all of the wrinkles are out of your fabric. We got rid of the deep crease, but you can see that there are small creases in the fabric. So now it's nicely pressed, and we'll go over to the cutting table. When you buy a fabric off the bolt, no matter how careful the cutter is at your fabric store, the line she cuts on is rarely, if ever, going to be on grain, on a cross grain thread. So what you need to do first of all is find a cross grain. I'm going to make a small clip in my fabric and then rip it. Not all fabrics rip easily, but many do. And I was hoping that would happen. You can see I started to rip and it actually went off of where the cut line is. So this fabric was actually cut very much off grain. I'm going to go another 1.5 inches or so in and rip. And fabric always wants to rip along one single thread. And we know now that we're on a cross grain, perfectly even. And we'd go back and iron this flat. Okay. We want to shake our fabric out a little bit, make sure that it's laying down evenly. And I like to work on a large cutting table. And one of the reasons I like these mats, whether it's a cardboard or a plastic one like this, is that you've got a grid. You have your lengthwise grid, but you also have a crosswise grid. Lining up our selvages is quite easy, and I know many of you do that very automatically. And I'm going to pull this over right along a grid line. In this case, I'm just using the closest grid line to me. But I want to demonstrate to you why it's so important to cross grain fabric. If you note right now that my selvages are absolutely even and my fold line looks quite even too. But if you look here along the cross grain, you can see that actually one side of the fabric is bowing up and the other is bowing down. So if you smoothed your fabric out, the length of your fashion fabric out, and cut your garment, and it'd be easy with this fluid, movie, drapey fabric to do that. When you made your garment, the side, if you cut your fronts in this one section, one side of your front, the hemline would bow down, and on this side, where the fabric is going up, the other side of your garment would be bowing up. So it's very important to cross grain as well as grain on the length. So what I like to do is get my edges even and then carefully bring it up to my grid line. And use your fingertips, and it likes to move back and forth. You don't want to stretch and pull it because then you're going to pull it out of shape, but you want to just gently pat it into shape. And then you work down the length of your fabric. If you have a lot of yardage, don't let the end of your yardage fall off the table because it's going to pull everything off grain again. This is a nice example. Working down there, I've pulled this down from my grid line, so I want to make sure this gets pulled back up. If I have a lot of fabric and say 2 or 3 long, if I have an 8-gore skirt and I have lots of pattern pieces, I would probably cut my skirt sections that would fit on one length, and I would rip it again and go through the process one more time, or as many